we're just coming out of this period of, there was a lot of dumb money in the games industry from like 2021, 22. As long as you had worked at Riot or Blizzard,
yes,
you could go out and raise $5 million to make your game. You could have been a janitor at Riot and gone out and raised $5 million.
Yeah.
That's not happening anymore, right?
No.
Because most of those companies failed, and now, to your point, you have to show up, you have to bring something, a compelling experience. How far along does that have to be? I mean, what are you seeing with successful pitches that are coming to you?
Yeah, and just as kind of a conversation topic, so I've worked in both games and tech, and there's a little bit of difference in kind of what you have to show in games. I actually think the bar is higher in games because the risks tend to be higher. There's financial risk along with creative risk.
Right.
You could do a game that's technically very good and you kind of miss your market, right? Or it's not fun. And so I would say you are coming with a pitch deck, and the pitch deck has to kind of show like what it is that the game is and how it's going to progress, key art, but you really have to come with, I'd say, that core gameplay loop. What is the main type of gameplay that makes it fun? I can give you an example. I was working with a young team, and if you guys know like the Dark Souls type of gameplay, and if you don't, if you know kind of like third person, meaning the camera.
Look how many of them are nodding? See, I told you were
nodding.
gamers.
There's people nodding. Okay,
they know what Dark Souls is, right?
Right, and so what these people came up with was more of like a first person, and they took a risk in that it's a lot harder to do melee, like swords and shields type of gameplay, where it's first person, where you're just and have it feel visceral, like when the sword hits the shield and the sound is right, that it feels like it. And so they iterated on that. And they got that right. And they had a huge, long story. They had lots of characters, but what they showed up with was a beautiful presentation of a deck, right? Some key art of what the characters look like, but most importantly, really just good, solid gameplay. And some of it was gray boxes, and some of it, instead of like a castle, you would just kind of see like really primitive boxes. But up front, like the swords, the shield, and the skeletons that they were destroying, you could play that right then and there. Right? Everything else was simplified, but that core gameplay loop, they had it, they iterated on it, they tested it, and they knew for themselves that it was already getting into like a fun, visceral type of experience.
And I think that's a good point, because, and this is something that I tell students all the time, a core gameplay loop does not have to be beautiful, it does not have to be polished. It's basically what happens when you have the controller in your hands, what is the haptic experience of making something happen on screen, and that doesn't have to look like Breath of the Wild. It doesn't have to be beautiful, right? You could do that with a block world or something.
Yeah, you could have that separate. Some people call it a beautiful corner, where literally you say, this is like a typical building in our medieval, fantasy, and it literally is the corner of a building, and it's built to the specs and the stout, just to show off what the aesthetic is going to be. And that does help get in the mind. I'm actually going to build off a little bit of something what Tomo was saying. Tomo was saying kind of like maybe Tomo's here is finally giving himself a break, but you have to think about your audiences, right? Like when you're writing, when you're pitching, you're really kind of, when you're dealing with a traditional publisher, and we'll talk about that in a second, you're kind of pitching to a multitude of audiences. They have some creative, real gamer gameplay people in there who are going to be as excited and passionate about you as, as far as, is this a really cool game? And they're going to have some marketing people in the room. They're going to be like, yeah, this is really fun, but who are you marketing this to? And they're going to have financial people in the room. And so as a result...
And they want to know what is the size of the potential audience for that, and how defined is it, and what's it going to cost to reach that audience.
Exactly, an interplay, and how are you going to engage it, right? Is this a replayable experience? Are you going to have to build expensive, additional items, throughout the entire game? You have to drop items. How much does that cost? Or is this a more limited experience? And you need to be able to have your budgets in place. So you kind of have to come with a business model, a creative model, and be able to kind of talk to each of those core different types of people within the publisher. That gets also back a little bit to, if you can launch your first title yourself on mobile, part of the reason why mobile's so popular is some people can, with a small team, get right to kind of launching it and testing it, then that's an advantage, right? Or if you go right to Steam, because sometimes you can just kind of prove that by bringing it to the market.
So let's say that I've gotten to that point. I've managed to self-fund a demo, and it's compelling. Maybe I've even gotten to the point where I can show some retention and conversion KPIs on a mobile game. I'm ready to have a real conversation with a Netflix or a Tencent or a big publisher or funding entity. Here's where you've probably seen creators come in with either creative crazy terms that they're asking for that are just ridiculous, or they come in not knowing what to ask for, right? Where do you strike the balance there? Where would you tell creators to strike that balance? What do they need to come in thinking about in terms of those deal terms?
Well, that's actually a really good question, because here's the interesting, it can seem like the most challenging part of the equation, right? You're a new creative studio, maybe you're one person, maybe you're 12 people, and you don't have any idea of what industry standard business terms are, and so in a certain way that can seem like the most complex thing, but in a way, it's actually the simplest solution, which is you don't do this on your own, okay? You go out and you find experienced game attorneys who have preferably worked both sides of the deal, okay? But people who have basically been in the business and understand what the standard terms are, what should be in the agreement, because sometimes those things aren't in there, okay? And also can help coach you as far as what's important to retain, what do you fight for, where do you give, and where do you compromise? Because really, you're going to see these documents, right? These 30-page, could be 10-page agreements that you've never seen before, and they're going to go back and forth with these changes, and your eyes are going to start to glaze. You have to have someone in your corner who can sit and basically walk you through what's really going on and explain to you what's of core importance. Like, what do you, if I'm representing you, what do I need to keep here? What's going to keep your company afloat? What's going to give you maybe the best hope of creative control? Maybe not total control, but how are you going to be able to maintain your vision within this relationship where they have the money and they have the leverage, right? But obviously they're hiring you for that creative vision, so there's a little bit of give and take there. And having someone experienced who's pragmatic, who isn't going to, be careful of the attorney who only sometimes works in this industry. You're not trying to win every paragraph. You're trying to kind of hold on to your key important metrics.
Right.
You want to, own your IP. Look, maybe they get the first rights at the second and third game, but, and maybe they get to determine merchandising. I mean, what percentage of games go to merchandising? But don't give it away entirely, right? And so there's just this interplay.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're going to have 4 or 5 things that are really important, and the other stuff can almost be distracting.
Merchandising is one of those things that I've seen publishers give away very generous rights because they know it's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. Yeah.
But in exchange for that, they've basically, taken your shorts and they've taken the IP and everything else.
Yeah, and I've seen young studios basically give away their IP ownership rights, and you should not be doing that deal, right? If they're really that interested in your IP, you should be maintaining ownership of that IP. Now, look, if they come with just such a huge amount of money, I mean, sometimes you have to take the deal that you're going to do. But if that's the case, you want to be advised that basically, like, look, this is the best deal we're going to get. Here's how this might work. But if it doesn't work, okay, the attorney needs to down. It's like, this is the downside. Ultimately, you need someone to work with you that is explaining, what good might happen, bad might happen, how we deal with that. Because you don't want to be a year and a half into a production and still not really understand the nature of the relationship that you have with a given publisher.
Yeah.
Right? It can be deadly because you're investing a lot of time, obviously depending on the project, but it can be a lot of time.
Yeah, and how would you advise a fledgling studio to go about finding that counsel? Because you and I, I'm sure, have worked with a lot of attorneys in the games industry, and probably a lot of attorneys that claim to be in the games industry or have a lot of knowledge there. How do you vet them?
I would just ask them, how many game companies they represent, right, and what their focus is, right? Just talk to them and get a sense of who they are, and just ask around within the industry. There are several game attorneys, but it's interesting. It's a smaller amount of attorneys. So since I've worked in tech, I can't count how many attorneys there are in tech. There are thousands, okay? So most recently I've worked with, of course, an AI company. So the past 10, 11 months, there are thousands of attorneys in tech. I think game attorneys, I don't know, 3? Yeah, so I'm relying on Bill, who's I always, kind of defer to on kind of a lot of creative and other issues, but there's really not that many. There's dozens. There's probably, and some of them are highly specialized, but I would say literally less than 100. And so you just ask within the industry, and some of us are good for certain types of studios and certain fits. Within the big studios themselves, they have entire teams.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to understand very well too. You're going to get paper, you're going to get the agreements from the publishers, okay? And look, and we'll talk about, look, if you're going on Apple's developer, you're just signing their developer agreement. There's nothing you can do. But if you're getting published by an EA or a mid-sized publisher, they have their agreements, they have their forms. They are highly advantaged for them. And so you need someone who can get through the agreement, turn it quickly, and tell you what's going on in the agreement. And speed, by the way, is important, right? Because something that I've seen is, I'd say time kills all deals, right? And if you let something drag out too long, they might have another game kind of going on in the background.
Yeah. For me anyway, having been on both sides of those deals, and I'm not an attorney myself, but I've worked with a lot of them, I think the first principle of negotiation is if you can't walk away from the deal, it's not a negotiation, it's a hostage crisis.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you need an attorney, you need counsel to help make it a competitive process so that you can walk away if you have to.
Yeah, look, ideally, hopefully, if your game is getting one publisher interested, like the best position you can be in is to have more than one publisher interested in your game, right? It's like anything else in this world. If you've got 2 people buying, you're infinitely better positioned than having one person looking at you. But you'd be surprised, even if one serious publisher is strongly considering you, you have leverage because think about it, they have seen dozens of games and now they are talking to you. Why is that? That is because they see something. They see either a new core gameplay. Like I remember, so my son, he plays League, he plays all these other games. I remember when he first started playing Dead by Daylight. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know if anyone knows this game, but it's a horror game where you basically either play the killer or one of 4 or 5 people trying to run from the killer. And what's interesting about it is it's asymmetrical, right? Yeah. And you can imagine the people who wanted to basically get like a new type of asymmetrical game, right? So if someone is talking to you, you basically have something that they're very interested in. You don't have necessarily a ton of leverage, but you also don't have to accept the worst deal in the world. They've already invested some time. They see that you have some possibility.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So you can get something out of this deal.
Yeah, and that's true of venture too. And I think maybe a lot of creators don't realize this, but people who are making venture investment, they're like the One Ring. They want to be found, right? And they need to be because they have limited partners that are investing in their fund. They have a certain amount of time in which they have to deploy that investment, or they give it up, or there are other penalties that they face, or whatever. But they need deal flow, and they need to talk to as many creators as possible, because even if it's not your deal that they take, it might be one that you introduce to them. So I don't come in thinking that you have zero leverage because you've never published a game or you've never done a deal with this company, right?
Yeah. No, in fact, I know people back in California who have recently, maybe as of a year ago, started smaller game funds, and they haven't fully deployed, meaning they haven't spent all of their money because they're still looking for those games and those teams, right? And that I think is critical too. It's a little bit different from tech. Tech, I would almost say that they're more interested in the team than they are the game, because they know that, right now, I was recently working at this AI company that the MVP, the minimum viable product, right, is going to shift. They know that the design is going to change, and so they're almost, on average, more interested in the tech team behind it, right? When they run into issues, do they have the right engineers behind them? Or do they know how to get another engineer good? Or do they have that gravitas, that pull in the industry to be like, I need a good marketing person, and that's going to work with them. In games, they really want to see the vision, but they also want to know who's behind it. So again, if you've already shipped a couple games, you can be talking to a lot more people, but when you are a fledgling crew, you do have to kind of show up with something that demonstrates at least some of that software engineering and that design and that art capabilities to basically, almost like you're putting together a portfolio by demonstrating, showing a little bit of the game, like, we have the strength to finish this title.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also have a plan to grow, right?
Yeah.
You need to understand your own kind of business modeling as well, too.
Pitching is storytelling, right?
It is.
And people buy into founders. They buy into visions. They would like to tell you that they have a rigorous process for evaluating deals. Some of them do,
Yes.
but frankly, it's a gut call more often than not, and it's based on the story that you tell them. Right?
Yeah, and it's the story of the game and the team. And I think in some ways, interestingly, it's somewhat almost advantageous to be, coming from different markets. That is, it's not necessarily a disadvantage to not be in one of the bigger markets like Los Angeles or Austin or even Dallas, right? These are known markets, or Helsinki or Tel Aviv, because I think game people in particular, they recognize that new ideas and new strengths can come from small teams. So they are actually a little bit more willing to kind of sit down and talk to people from cities that they can't even point to on a map.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think game development in Tbilisi has this advantage because I think that in the West, people sense that there's something really interesting going on here.
Yeah.
They don't want to be the last ones to figure it out and invest in it. They don't want to be the first either, but that's okay because that's what Jessica and I are doing.
Yeah. No, I definitely think there's always a little bit of FOMO. People are going to be asking me, so you were in Tbilisi, like, what did you see there? And I'll say, like, I saw a lot of strength in tech,
Yeah.
right? And I saw a lot of people with just natural creativity and also great town to hang out with and do business in. Yeah.
So something that you've said is that creators need to be able to recognize when they're being blown off, right?
Yeah, that can be hard.
Expand on that a little bit because I've had this experience both with my companies and portfolio companies where you keep pouring time and money into a demo based on some feedback that you got, and it's just a vicious cycle because they're really telling you no, but you're not hearing it. What is that something that you've seen too?
Yeah, when you're speaking with a potential publisher, hopefully publishers, you need to kind of keep up that momentum for a variety of reasons. One, as I said, time kills all deals. I can give you a good example. I was recently, as of a few months ago, I saw a deal, unfortunately, finally, I think, die. Okay. And this deal had been being worked on for several months. They thought they had an investor, and the calls got less frequent. Okay, the feedback was kind of getting vague, like they were paying less and less attention. And then ultimately, they kind of pushed and they basically said, well, look, what's going on? And then, the funding source finally said, look, honestly, we're just going to go in a different direction entirely, and we're going to go with an entirely different project.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to kind of realize you need to kind of keep up that momentum. Even when you're first talking to someone, try to keep them engaged. Try to get a sense of how interested they are in you, because even when they really are engaged, you don't want to become, someone that they're basically stringing along as maybe their second choice.
Right.
It's like a relationship. You want to make sure that they're committed and that you turn things around quickly and kind of get the deal done.
Tell me if this is something that you've seen from creators, but they come in thinking, hey, Netflix just launched a show or a game like mine, so they must want more of that, more roguelike, more match 3 puzzle, more whatever that is. Walk us through why that logic fails.
Well, first of all, the games you're probably seeing published, even if they're mobile games, were likely greenlit months ago, if not years ago. Right, so these decisions were made by people a long time ago who, they may not even be at the company anymore.
Right, but that's the kind of lead time.
Right, that's kind of lead time. So the person who championed that game that you're talking about, they may not even be at that publisher anymore. And also, it's just kind of hard to understand, even if that game is doing well for them, what the core interest of that publisher is. That, first of all, they may have ideas for pushing into different markets. They may be thinking, look, we have another game that we're not even talking to you about that's going to fulfill that same interest.
Yeah.
Right, so if they've got roguelikes, maybe they've already got 2 more roguelikes that are coming out, one 6 months from now and one a year from now, and they're not telling you because that's under NDA. Or maybe they've decided that it's too saturated for, fantasy roguelike, third-person games because they've seen the market and they think they've tapped everything. And even if they are really gung-ho and doing well using a particular genre of game, if they can, they're going to go back to the same people who have built those successful games to help build out in that direction.
That's a good point. I think something that I've seen with a lot of these companies is that they're definitely not interested in a copycat of the game that they already have, but they are interested in something that appeals to a similar audience.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've already made the investment to acquire this audience, and they might be able to jump that audience over to your game from another one of their properties that people are churning out of.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can't, look, not every publisher is going to want to do your game. Okay, right? You might be coming up with a roguelike, and this company is dying for a new roguelike that looks like yours. The next publishers be like, I am already saturated with roguelikes.
Yeah.
Like, you might be doing something that's very fantasy and, oriented as far as artistic aesthetic, and they might like or not dislike the. Do your game, okay? Be passionate about your game, but be prepared to talk about what market it's going to reach. And if you can, there's someone I know who basically said, if you can describe your market in a combination of 1 or 2 things, I'm not looking at you, Bill, at all. But be able to, in very simple terms, describe what your game is and the markets that it might appeal to. Doesn't have to be exactly. But if you can say, look, we're going after people who liked this game and that game, but it's different in some unique respects, well, that's a conversation starter. You're saying you're going to appeal to markets that are already existing, but you're going to be offering them something different. Okay, and you'd explain to me very simply, if you need a chart that's like 30 pages long to explain like why your game is going to market, you've lost me. Now, if you have that level of detail thinking in it, that's great, but you need to be able to break things down initially into what people will call at least an elevator pitch-like mentality. Like, we are going after people who like roguelikes and who like fantasy, but this is why our game is unique. Well, that's understandable in simple terms. Now bring me in a little bit deeper as I'm sitting down, as I'm playing, as I'm looking at your art deck. Oh, and I see that you have a budget played.
Yeah.
Now I'm leaning into you, and I want to talk more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to.
But you've got to
bring the
hook
people
them
in.
first.
You got to hook them first.
Right. And that hook is, I think that a lot of game designers especially fall prey to this. They've thought out this entire universe of characters and interconnected worlds, and they want to come in, they want to talk about the whole thing. When really, if you can't express what the core appeal of this is going to be in a couple of sentences, you're not ready to pitch it yet.
Yeah, show me a couple characters, but yeah, let's not have a 45-minute conversation about the lore of my game. Show me the core gameplay. Show me the proposed aesthetic. Talk to me about what you think the markets are. Who's going to be, I saw one person talk about it, say like, almost in shells. And you can have different ways to describe it, like, here's my core market, here's my secondary market, and here's how I'm going to reach additional types of people.
Yeah.
Okay? And then talk to me about how you're going to be testing the different aspects of your game. You showed me the core gameplay, but talk to me about how you're a good company and how you're able to kind of test these key features that you haven't built yet. Tell me where you think there's risk. Say, well, we have this secondary game loop, we haven't tested it yet. Be open about that, because now you're a mature company. You're being transparent with me about where you think is risk and where you might need to pivot.
Right.
Don't hide that. Talk about it.
Yeah.
This is where games and tech are very similar. It's these are mature investors. If they see risk and you're not talking about it, okay, that worries them. If they see risk and you're exposing it to them, it's like, well, we haven't tested this yet, and we need to test it. Okay.
Yeah.
These people are willing to be an open communicator about where their risks are and where they might need to kind of pivot or maybe spend more money or bring on additional talent.
That's a good point. I mean, expose your vulnerabilities because they build trust.
Yeah, they build trust, and they're going to see them.
Yeah, they're going to see them anyway.
Yeah. You know, if you're, whether it's, you know, Skybound or EA or Netflix, you know, you're going to be talking to people who are incredibly experienced and who are going to kind of see issues and raise questions. And for the love of God, don't just put like a new page in your deck that talks about AI for no reason. I'll tell you, I think it was a...
Or Web3.
Or Web3, that's even more funny. So I was in Web3 for about a year at a company called Dapper, but before that, when I was at Tencent, there was this time, I want to say like maybe 2021, 2022, where we were seeing these game decks, right, with playables, where it'd be like, you know, 8 to 10 pages, and page 11 seemed like it didn't quite fit, and it was Web3, how you're going to have NFTs in your game, and it was just like someone had been working on their game for 6 months, and they just kind of slid that in.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
this is the magic bullet that sells games now.
Yeah, exactly. So at one point, every game deck was an NFT game, like overnight, and all the developers were talking, they were all NFT Web3 specialists. And we were just like, sorry, this is a lot of BS, right? Just talk to me about why your game is going to be fun to play, and let's start there.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think there's such a thing as a blockchain game, right? Because if I came to you and said, did you know that the new Assassin's Creed uses procedurally generated trees? You'd say, okay,
yeah,
right?
Valheim's a procedurally generated world.
Do you care? No, probably not. No. And I wouldn't call it a procedurally generated trees game.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a background technology that may or may not be relevant, it's not going to be a selling point, at least for a sophisticated publisher and investor, to see that you've tacked this on there.
Unless you're really developing something that is core, like if you're developing a whole new set of AI tools that does X, right, and it's really going to fundamentally change, you know, or say narratives and how quests are generated or something. But again, that you really then have to become prepared to show how you're doing that. You know,
and it has to be from the player's experience, right? It has to be what is going to make this more appealing than games. What can a player do in this game that they couldn't do before this technology came in?
It should be proportional. If you say, look, we're responsibly using a certain amount of AI tools to generate this type of art, but not this type of art, okay, then have a quick conversation about it. You don't need to hide it.
Yeah.
But don't just talk about AI because you think it's hip. Like, talk about either what you're doing or not doing with it. And also be prepared, if you are using it, to make sure that you are understanding about what the risks are from IP ownership, right? Because it does present some risks. And for some publishers, they want to know that you're using some of it maybe to reduce costs, but they're also a little bit scared that if you're using it and you don't know what the implications are, that can be a bit of a turnoff too.
I think you and I could probably talk about do's and don'ts of pitching for a long time.
Oh yeah,
we're going to run out of time here momentarily, but do you have like one piece of advice if there is a Sakarvelian creator out there who has just gotten the meeting, they just scored the meeting with Netflix, with Tencent, with EA, or whomever it is, what's one word of caution of what you should do or not do when you get on that call?
Oh boy. I would say stick to your vision. Don't start repeating what they want to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, and I've seen people fall into that trap where they think, well, I need to be able to talk to them about kind of what I see on their platforms. I don't think so. I think stick to kind of what your core interest is of the game, but also be prepared to listen as far, and maybe even having some flexibility and understanding their platform as well too.
Nice.
So you don't need to become them. You shouldn't be a chameleon.
Yeah.
Right, but you should be able to listen, and I think there's a big difference there. You know, hold on to what's true, but also show that you have the ability to kind of be a business partner.
I've got one too. Don't read your slides.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If the slides are up there and they can read, assume your audience can read. Right?
Yes.
If you're just reading the slides, they don't need you, and you are the storyteller. So.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and cram in at least one question from the audience here, if we can be super quick.
We got a question out there, everybody?
We have one over here.
Hey, you.
Hello. First, thank you to share your experience about gaming. From indie studio and Georgian game, Revolt Entertainment. We make first-person horror game, which is a walking simulator. But main thing is this have a small amount, not small amount, but little bit amount of players. But we are trying to achieve to show our game better. And how to make these things even better, because we have a small market, but we have great ambitions.
I think the question comes down to the specific game. So, and understanding what might that barrier be. So for instance, if you're producing it here in Georgia, why do you think the market is limited? Is it a mobile game that is only appealing based on language? Have you brought it into English? If it's a PC game.
It's a PC console game, first-person horror game, and we are trying to launch for worldwide, and we also have a demo on Steam.
Oh, that's great. I was going to say, so get it on Steam, and get the PR people, get the friends and family, make it a community effort to get people talking about it, but really look at the people who are playing the game and be in your Discord channels and be talking to them about what people love about this game and what they want to see, and expand on that. There's no simple answer to that. But if you're starting out as a small game and you've got community players who already like the game, we would say lean into that. Understand what people like about your game and build more of that. And at some point, look, the reality is some games kind of have a natural mass where it might be that they only get to a certain size of market. And if that's the case, see if you can push it, but at some point, if you don't think you can push it further, or you've tried things, you might need to take a step back and be like, well, now maybe we do another game. Some games just have a certain limited size of market.
I think your secret weapons at this stage are KPIs, whatever analytics you have in there that you can show off. Like we have a small audience, but we're showing this kind of retention, we're showing this much daily playtime, we're showing this kind of conversion rate. That's something that will get somebody to invest in you building your audience through paid user acquisition, right? And the other thing is community, like Aryeh is talking about. It doesn't cost much to go out and start building a community on Discord, building it through Steam Early Access. It takes a lot of legwork, but you can also find community moderators very cheaply. They're working out of countries where they're more or less specializing in this, and you can do a lot of it yourself. And building that community is the other thing that you can show to a potential investor or publisher and get them to come in and really supercharge your user acquisition.
Yeah, if there's that one streamer that's got an unusually large community of followers that likes your game, don't be afraid to go engage that streamer and get them to keep doing more of the same.
Yeah.
Yes, we think our story is unique because fake priests come to village and make exorcisms and give some interesting scenario in our games.
Well, I want to see your game.
I do too, actually. I was just going to say that. Hook me up.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Aryeh, for all of your insight.
Good to see
It's
you,
been a lot of fun.
All right. Amazing, amazing.